My name is Saskia. I've got over a decade of experience in running a small business in the needlecraft industry. I'm obsessed with the healing magic of crafting and the power of community. Dreaming big about a world where we rely on value-based businesses, the kindness economy, and where we can fully say, fuck fast fashion. A Smaller Life aims to inspire you to look at your wardrobe differently. Where do you buy? How do you use your clothes? And can you make some of it yourself? We learn from experts in the needlecraft, textile, and creative industry, big names and small, about what it's actually like to run a small business. I'm educated in marketing and photography and learned to do everything else on the job. Selling, pattern and product design, teaching, and running a needlecraft school. As a small business owner, you're in charge of everything. Branding, marketing, selling, promoting, and cleaning the loo. Emotional talks with sellers about wins and woes, product and design, conscious decision making, why we do it, how we do it, and what we need to become the future of fashion without burning the hell out. And I'm determined to lift our scene up for the world to notice so they can step away from fast fashion. Can you believe it? This is the 50th episode of A Smaller Life podcast. The first episode aired August 12, 2020, and ever since I've been able to upload an episode every other week. I wanted to celebrate my cheerleaders before we go on with the interview. In my years of building my business, pivoting it so many times, shaping it into something that fits in my needs and or the needs of my audience a little bit better, there have been special people that followed me and cheered me on along the way. There are many more people than I mention here. I love all of you dearly, but these people have actively played important roles in cheerleading and supporting regularly and out loud, and I want to give them a heartfelt thank you. So, I'm 100% positive that Herma from Friesland is my most loyal follower. From almost day one, when I was writing my Sas Knits It Again blog in 2005, she has been a steady and kind cheerleader. I so appreciate that she took on all the changes and still replies to my newsletters and listens to the podcast. Herma, proost. Mijn koffie in de lucht op jou. Meitan was one of my first students about 16 years ago when I started teaching knitting. And in the first year of starting my business, she has always been a powerful force of positivity and motivation. She's one of the reasons that I pushed through and set up shop. We have since lost contact, but if you are listening, May, thank you so much. Saskia, who has taken care of running my numbers, taking care of the books from the early stages of my business. I was so happy to hand that over to you. And she's done this without complaining about my lack of talent or, for that matter, insight in the matter. Thank you, Sassy. Then Floor, a super supportive who has always been ready to help while she has a busy job herself and 2 dogs to take care of. Always into what I think of next and very keen conversational partner when it comes to the topic of living a more sustainable life. A cheerleader and a source of inspiration in our community as well. Thank you, Floor. And Avi, I want to mention you too, reacting to the newsletter, listening to the episode, joining in on my thoughts and ideas, and fully embracing my weird. Thank you so much. I've been working with Alison almost from the beginning. In 2020, she has become my editor and the roots of the podcast. We have a very mutual flexibility when it comes to each other's personality. I think I have a very warm, professional and grown-up relationship with Alison. She has been much more than a hired help. She's been supportive and a wonderful source of feedback. I have learned so much from her, and I hope to believe that she also learns from me. It's wonderful to have a working relationship where both parties are moving forward because they want to learn from the process and each other. Thank you, Ali. My European friend circle that had started as a business accountability group in a course that we all took has now turned into a group of very close and dear friends. We've met each other in real life 2 times, and that is special as we come from Denmark, Switzerland, Germany, and the Netherlands. Natasha, Nadia, Kevin, aka Tracy, and Vera, thank you. And then my spontaneous mini craft podcast coach triangle, Kim and Zoe, are excellent at supporting, cheerleading, and showing vulnerability. Thank you, girls. And there are some new cheerleaders I want to mention too. Kathleen and Anne have joined our community and are both incredibly warm and sharing and active in offering their wisdom there. Anne has also become a Patreon. That hadn't even occurred to me that that's possible too. That's like super cheering. I love that. I've set up Patreon for people that want to support and cheer in the background. The community is there if you want to actively work and share and receive the good things about building a conscious practice and our wardrobe. Talking of which, at the moment, we are all taking our personal JWC Jawel Community pledges, so that in the most fun way, we may grow in our knowledge and skills to make better choices for the environment, living creatures, and ourselves. If you want to join, go to community.ja-wol.com. Cheerleaders can be people inside or outside your inner circle. Inside or outside of your actual work. They can be paid to do their job and still be cheerleaders. They can be uninterested in what it is that you do and still support you and cheer you on. We all need cheerleaders in our lives. And I was wondering, who are yours? Do you want to tell me about it? Then go to the show notes page on asmallerlife.com and leave a message there. Or if you have ideas or reactions about the 50 episodes that we've done so far, please send me a message. The energy of support is so important for me to keep this going and keep moving forward. All right, then I wanted to share a few cool stats with you from the stat page of my podcast. The most popular episode is number 44. Melody Hoffman of B Mandarins on where personal and professional identity meet. This episode is 3 months old and already has over 1,200 downloads, which is amazing. She's a very interesting and lovely person, so if you haven't listened to episode 44, go ahead. The episode is definitely growing with around 340 downloads in the first week of launching an episode-ish. It could be a little bit more and a little bit less, but a few hundred downloads in the first week of launching is a big deal. I mean, it is for me. And most episodes end up getting around 500 downloads, but it grows as time moves on because when people come in, they also start listening to other episodes. So it's always growing. And this makes A Smaller Life hit the top 10% of podcasts in my field, or actually at all. That is true. 10% of the top podcasts, which is, there's so many podcasts I know, but that is like a big thing. So if you are listening and you think, ooh, that's interesting, I actually want to sponsor that show, then you can go to asmallerlife.com and learn more about sponsoring. I will have to tell you that I only take on sponsors that fit the values of the podcast and the mission that we're on together. So if you have a sustainable crafting business or something that could help along those lines, go ahead and shoot me a message. My prices are very doable. And also we don't have a sponsor yet, so great opportunities there. Half of the listeners listen on Apple Podcasts. And if you haven't done this yet, go over there and give us a review. It really, really helps to reach more people. And reaching more people means getting closer to our mission, that to have all people have a more sustainable way of looking at their wardrobe, a more conscious way of purchasing and buying around their whole lives and their crafts, and just having less of a footprint. And then 65% of listeners are in Europe, 30% in the US, 4% in Asia, and a whopping 7% come from Oceania. I really need to scream louder because Africa and South America are not making the percentages yet. So if you have any friends there, just send them the link to the podcast and we'll see their names pop up in the stats next year. The largest amount of listeners in one city are in Melbourne, Australia. Who knew? Hello, Melbourne. I'm still practicing my Australian accent. I can't do it yet. I need to start talking to Leah on a weekly basis so I can really learn. It's terrible. It's horrible. I can't do it. Next, my hometown of Rotterdam is the second largest city with listeners. Hallo Rotterdam, je weet zelf, hoi. And then the US has the most listeners per country, and the Netherlands comes second, followed by the UK and again Australia. And then I want to say a special hi to 4 people listening in Jönköping in Sweden, Heido, and the 3 people listening in Sao Paulo. This is like 3 people. Hola! And so this is the end of the stats, the end of the cheerleaders, and I want to give you a big, big, big thank you for listening and following along. And we are going on into the interview and on to the next 50, eh? Today I'm talking to Lin Bang, also known as Maya. She is the owner of Knit with Attitude, a yarn shop in London. She offers an amazing array of yarns and organizes events and just has recently doubled her space. So I wanted to go in and talk to her about this change in her business, but also talk to her about what it's like for her to run this business in such a niche industry. So I hope you will all enjoy what she has to offer. There's a lot of really good stuff in there. Enjoy, and don't forget to subscribe to Maya's newsletter. You can go find her at knitwithattitude.com. Enjoy. You are here at A Smaller Life, Maya. I'm so happy that you're here, and welcome to our little chat.
Thank you so much for having me.
I'm excited. I want to hear all about Knit with Attitude and about you as a shop owner. And why don't we start off with, before we go deeper, I know that you had a big party going. Can you tell us a little bit about what was going on in the shop?
We had a big party last Saturday where we were celebrating our shop expansion. Yeah, to keep it short, I've doubled everything in it with Attitudes. I've doubled the space, I doubled the yarn, I doubled the joy.
Wow, that's amazing. Did you have a good time at the party, or were you nervous and stressed out?
It is funny because when you do events in the shop, you're always really nervous that no one is going to show up. And it does happen occasionally that no one does. So I was really worried, but then people started pouring through the doors and I was a bit more relaxed at that point. But I do think that you put so much of yourself into things like this, and it becomes more personal than you really want it to be. There was a lot of people who asked me how I was feeling, and I said, if you ask me in a week, I've had time to digest how I'm feeling, and then I'll give you an honest answer. In those kind of situations, it's just really overwhelming, and you're trying to be as professional as you can and keep the calm.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that because I've got a little piece of artwork in the background that I wanted to show you somewhere in the interview. I'll tell you what it says in a second. I've put it up for now because for some reason I felt like it could be interesting for our conversation, but I don't have it up a lot. This is what it says. Do what you love and you'll never work a day in your life. But then the never work a day in your life is crossed out. And then it says, work super fucking hard all the time with no separation or any boundaries, and also take everything extremely personally.
Yeah, this is very true. I have just made an executive decision after running this wool shop for 13 years, and we've been open 7 days a week. I've just decided that we're going to be closed on Sundays.
Oh my gosh.
Because I need space and I need personal time, and I need to make up for, after 13 years, I have families. I need to make up to them.
Oh my gosh, I have so many questions about that. But why don't we start at the beginning first? And
Mm.
I'd love to hear how knitting came into your life. When did you learn to needlecraft, and how did that evolve into your business?
So, well, it's all because of my grandmother. She taught me to knit when I was 4. And so it's been part of my life, my whole life. And in periods, it became obsessive. So, and it's interesting because it's often those periods with change or emotional hardship that I grabbed my knitting and found big comfort in that. I don't want to go too much into it, but I have medical issues, which means that I, as a child, was a lot in hospitals and quite alone. And knitting has kind of been a comfort for me all through my life. However, I never pictured that I would run a yarn shop. That was never on the table. My education is within filmmaking, and I think what's been really important to me is to tell stories. So when I decided to open the yarn shop, I kind of did the same thing. I wanted to continue telling those stories that I already done through video as a medium, but now I was using yarn.
Hello, friends. I just want to say something to you quickly. So, if you're liking the podcast, if you're liking what I'm talking about, consider joining the mailing list. I have bi weekly updates on the podcast and or business insights and tips. The occasional exercise to get you ahead. If you want to actually talk to other business owners about the things that I talk about here on the podcast, why not become a Yavol community member for as little as €8.50 a month? That's like buying me coffee and a croissant. But don't do it for me though. Do it for yourself, because I promise that you will get something out of it, either the emails and or the community. So you can either go to the show notes or sign up through yavel.myflowdesk.com/pattern shift. I hope you'll join us. Wow, that sounds, what's the words? Recognizable, a lot of it. And I think a lot of knitters use knitting as a way to calm or console or hide even a little bit.
Mm,
And this is a big part of telling the story about needlecraft, isn't it? Like showing people how much knitting can do for you and how
mm,
it can support you in your life. So
mm.
how did you start your business? How did that come
But
along?
this was also because of my grandmother. I was doing a master degree in filmmaking, and my project was based in London. So me and my family, at that time was my husband and my daughter, we moved to London for a year. And when, as a Norwegian, when I came to London, and I discovered that at that time there were 3 good yarn shops in all of London. And
Yeah.
London is, the size of 3 times the size of Norway. So it was a mystery to me how in such a huge city you could have 3 wool shops.
Yeah.
So it started as a joke, really, between me and my husband, in terms of, well, if we don't know what to do with our lives, we can always go to London and open a yarn shop. So after spending a year in London, we moved back to Norway. We had our second child, and we both realized we were not done with London. London was this big magnet. And I also quickly realized that as a woman, then in my early 30s, even though I had lots of experience with filmmaking and been running my own production company in Norway, I realized there was no way I could break the industry here in London it would be demanding. I would be working 24 hours a day. I have two children. I would have to start from scratch, maybe do apprenticeships with no income. And I found that too hard. And then I opened a yarn shop, and that turned out to be much harder. but, but I didn't know that then. So my grandmother, she lent me, I think, the equivalent of about £800. And for that, I bought Norwegian yarn. And then when we came to London, I started trading at Spitalfield Market. So I was a market trader for a while. And that was the very beginning of Knit with Attitude.
Wow. Wow, it sounds amazing. So your whole family came from Norway and you are now Norwegian Londoners or London Norwegianers.
Yeah.
Both. And when you opened your shop 13 years ago, did you open it in the space where you are now?
No. What I did was I was in the position when I was trading at the market that I could put aside everything that I earned. So I was not dependent on my earnings to live from. And after 10 months as a market trader, actually in October 2010, I was then able to move into the tiniest shop. It was called by some the yarn kiosk because it was really, really tiny, about 8 square meters.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah. So that was my first beginning, and I continued, putting everything that I earned back into the business, and in that way it could grow. So I was in a privileged position back then. Then after, I would say, I've been in the shop for a year, and then we had a big finance crisis.
Yeah.
And if people have to choose between yarn and food, you would choose food.
Right.
So it could have ended. This adventure could have ended there. But I had a friend who had a similar tiny, tiny, tiny shop, and she was selling art and design, which also are things that people can't prioritize, And we met up. To be honest, we had a drunken night where we were, talking about how difficult things were and whether or not we had to close and how could we continue. And then we came up with this idea that we could share. And when we sobered up, it was still a really good idea.
Yeah.
So we started looking for premises, and in that way, because there were two of us and we shared the workload, we shared the expenses, the rent, all the utilities, all of that, we were able to get ourselves on a high street location and into a much bigger shop. And that's basically how we both survived the following years where it was really, really difficult financially.
Yeah. So smart. Yeah. So I also, from the privileged position that I didn't need to buy the food with my work. And so I also didn't go to a bank because I don't know if you know, but I used to have a yarn shop as well. And I put in 300 euros of my own saving to buy my first amount of yarn, and then worked from there, always putting back the money that I earned into the shop. So that's similar, a lot similar. Hi there, it's just me. I hope you are enjoying the interview. I just wanted to talk to you directly for a second. I've been recording the podcast for 2 years now, and I hope I've been giving you lots of value and some inspiration. If you are ready to give back, I have a few ways you can do that. You can go to www.ja-vol.com and subscribe to my newsletter. You can become an active member of our Ja-Vol online community and work at your sustainable wardrobe, or get mentoring for your small business in our BBBC program. And if you want to support more anonymously in the background, you can do that by becoming a patron of the show for the value of 1 cup of coffee each month. It's just a small thank you, and it makes it possible for me to continue to talk to interesting people and share their secrets with you. Go to www.ja-wool.com and find everything you need there. Thanks! I've been in the position to think, oh, this time when I want to grow my shop, this time I need to go to a bank or I need to be family funded, which is actually sometimes something I feel very uncomfortable around, but that's been shifting for me because it's so much better if you can be family funded, right? Because no interest, your family believes in you, they got your back, and nothing to be ashamed of. Like as a small business owner, sometimes you feel like you have to white knuckle everything all the way, which is it's hard enough as it is.
Yeah,
And yeah, and just keeping it going, especially through the crisis, and then now with the new crisis coming, it's super super hard.
yeah, it feels a bit ridiculous to just go full in, full risk, full expansion now, but
I don't think it really does. Your grandmother was an inspiration to you. My grandmother was too. I remember when 9/11 happened, I was studying cultural and social sciences. I similarly, like you, I was in photography and video first, and then into more of the background of the arts, the organizational part of it. And then 9/11 happened, and I was freaking out. I was like, this education, I cannot do anything. The world is burning. What am I doing? And she's like, well, when I was in the war, what people needed is distraction
yeah.
from pain. And so, whatever you do in the world of entertaining will have a lot of value, and that's always what I come back to. So I think in this time where things are hard, just getting your mind focused on something else can be so valuable, and sometimes it is worth. I don't know, a 20-pound skein of sock yarn can keep you occupied for a long time.
I want I also want to go back to what you said about the bank and that situation because I'm a very proud person, and this with like asking for help and leaning on others, it's difficult for me. But I'm also in the situation that I'm an immigrant and I'm self-employed, so bank is not it's not an option for me. I would never get a loan in a bank because of those things. So
Hmm.
I've always been dependent on finding other solutions for funding, which I also managed to do this time around. So I think if you go into such a venture as running a yarn shop, you basically have to leave a bit of your pride
Yeah.
and be a bit open to the opportunities that, yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. And did you end up doing it together with your husband?
Well, I am quite privileged. My husband is Kai. He's a programmer. He's also a very handy man. So basically, we are partners in the business in terms of I decide everything and he has to do what I say.
I love that.
But I had an online shop before online shopping was a thing.
Wow.
Yeah, and we, use this program called Dreamweaver. I don't think it even
Yeah.
exists anymore.
I
Um,
don't know, but I've heard of it.
yeah,
Yeah.
to kind of make our first website and all of that. So he's the back end of everything online. He's the one who makes sure that these things work. And again, I'm so privileged that I don't have to pay for it. Also, when we were going to do this shop expansion, there was a lot of like building and things that had to be done, and I don't have the funding for it. So hence, husband. So yeah,
Yes.
we're definitely partners in crime. Yeah. Mm.
Yeah. Yeah, family and community is very, very valuable in these
Yeah,
situations.
I also think that because yarn shops don't fit into the standard business model. Yarn shops are very
Absolutely.
niche and very unique. And you know, all the advice I got when I started did not fit for a yarn shop. So I think you are super dependent on family, connections, other people in the industry, because it is such a world of its own.
Absolutely. I love that you say that. So my husband or my partner, we're not married. Not yet. You never know.
Took us 10 years before we got married.
Yeah. Yeah. I've always said when I'm 50 and we're not married and we're still together, we have to.
Yeah.
I'm a few years away from 50, so who knows? But he's an entrepreneur, and it's always so complicated to have conversations with him about my business
Oh, yeah.
because he studied business. I started my different, what would we say, what we call this, my different brands, my different ventures from my passion
Mm.
and using the skills that I've been educated in, but it wasn't focused on business. So when we have a conversation, it is very difficult.
Mm.
Let's say it's very difficult. But along the way, I've picked up some things that did work for my work. But as you said, and I'm so happy that you said that, we do need to rely on each other and use each other's experiences. And I think sometimes there can be a vibe of it's so niche and the other yarn shops or the other entrepreneurs can be competition. Well, I think I've thought that a lot and I felt a lot different than I do now about these things.
Yeah,
But
I so agree. I so agree. The industry, the yarn industry, has changed a lot. I'm not gonna, mention names or situations, but I had people definitely trying to kick the feet under me when I started. I think the attitudes back then was to protect your own business. And if another yarn shop opens, they will take my customers because the customer base is so small.
yeah,
Which to me was not logical because we were in a city with 15 million people.
yeah,
I
yeah,
also think that, and this is like a thing that I've been fighting a lot about in London, and I will take a bit of credit for this because my attitude was that the more wool shops there are, the more knitters we create, and the more
exactly,
we collaborate, the more we maintain that level of customers, and that's how you grow.
yes,
That's how
exactly,
everyone grows.
yeah,
So I have a few principles like in my shop. One of them is that I will not demand exclusivity from any maker, any dyer, any because I don't think this is healthy for the industry as a whole. Although it can make sense for the single shop to kind of you need to protect what you have. But I find that collaboration is so much bigger and so much fruitful for everyone involved. Yeah.
absolutely. And I think the our industry, as you said, is so niche, is so different that we have to root ourselves in a common belief that we are
Yeah.
needed and that we can find enough customers. And as you said, that's been the biggest change in me for the last couple of years, that just working backwards, thinking how many customers do I actually need to make a viable business, and actually doing the math. Whereas before, I would just go into it and see what happened. And then I'd feel super annoyed and take everything super personal. That's not completely gone, but my attitude has been shifting a lot around it. And I think if you think about the amount of people that there are, we should be fine. But then we kind of need to find those people.
Yeah.
So shifting to that, Knit with Attitude has specific products. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, that's also something that has changed a lot the last years, I will say, because as I said, my background was in filmmaking, and in films, I made films about subcultures, about radical politics, and about the environment.
Wow.
And these things were what I wanted to bring with me into the yarn shops. I wanted to prove that it was possible to sustain a business based on ethical and environmentally friendly principles. So every single yarn in this shop has a good story to tell. They do good in the world, whether it's about being social enterprises, whether it is about how the yarn has been produced. We are very concerned about animal welfare. All of these things we brought into the shop. When I started, most of my time was spent trying to find sustainable yarn and to trace the origin of the wool, which was in many cases impossible.
Impossible at that
And
time.
what I did was I would ask directly, and quite often by quite big names, I was told that no, that's an industry secret. We will not tell you where our yarns are sourced from.
Oh my gosh.
So there was quite a few of those really popular large brands that I really wanted to have in the shop, which I just couldn't take in because of that. Nowadays, this is of course completely turned, and that I would say that the consumer consciousness around these things have changed so much. So producers and makers of yarn realize that transparency is a selling point.
Selling points, yes.
So now they want to tell everyone where does the yarn comes from, which makes, and who makes it. That's also really, really important. Who makes it?
Yeah.
So it's made my life easier in that sense. It's much easier to source wonderful, beautiful, lovely fibers, lovely colors, and to be able to explain to my customers where does it come from and who made it.
Yeah. I think Louise Scully did a lot of work around that with she now has Woolworks. I'm trying to remember the podcast she had before, but she was all about British yarn getting good labels and all of that. So just a little shout out to her. I think it's a combination of how society as a whole works. For me, it started when I wanted to sell natural yarns to everybody. But I found out in the process that if I sold cheap natural yarns, that the price was paid by someone else or something else. And that's something I've learned along the way. I had to stop selling certain brands because it didn't fit my actual values.
Yeah.
So I really had to dive a little bit deeper into what I wanted. Although from a business perspective, you kind of have to find what the audience wants and then do that.
I think that today you cannot open a wool shop without focusing on sustainability because it's demanded by the customer, which was not the case when I opened. Not at all.
No.
And there was also a lot of like miseducation out there. It was a big difference between Norway and England. Because I could be in my shop and then people came in and they specifically one I remember, she came in and she was like, do you have any baby wool? And I was so proud, and I was going to show her the most beautiful Norwegian wool I had. And she was like, no, it has to be acrylic. And I'm like, what do you mean it has to be acrylic? And she said, well, everyone knows that if babies use wool, they will become allergic. And I'm like, what? And I was so shocked that this poor customer, because I then started laughing. And I went, but that's like wrapping your baby in plastic.
Exactly.
And then when she left, I felt bad because of my reaction. And I looked into it and I found that when you had the big acrylic explosion in the UK,
Yeah, after the war.
yeah, on the wards in the hospitals, mums were told by the nurses and the doctors to use acrylic on the children. And it was not
Oh,
about the allergies. It was because it was easier for the hospitals to throw them in their big machines, washing machines.
yes.
And
Yeah.
so that became the truth, even though it has no bearing in reality.
That is so crazy,
Hmm.
isn't it? How these stories become huge. But that also teaches us something about telling the good stories because they still have potential to become the actual truth.
Hmm.
So when you are in this kind of a soul searching moment and you're like, is what I'm doing actually making a difference? I always come back to that. I always think it does make a difference with knitting and with owning a yarn shop and teaching people how to knit. It's not only the story about sustainability, it's a story about mental health, it's a story about community, it's a story about all of these wonderful things. And we cannot talk about that enough. And that's why podcasts and blogs are so important.
I also think for me, this last year has been a crossroad. There's there's some heartache in terms of this expansion, because I told you I was sharing my premises with another shop, and I've done that for 10 years. And
Mm,
then she decided to move out of London, so she's taken her shop to a different part of England. But it meant that I had to decide: will I take this on and take the whole premises, or will I close Knit with Attitude? And it was exactly this, with going back and looking at what I have done. And I am convinced that I have changed some people's lives through my
yeah.
shop. And the community that I've been part of creating in my neighborhood and in my area, I see that the role of Knit with Attitude has been so important. And that's why I then decided to do whatever I could to continue and to stay
Mm,
on. Um, because it's hard to, when things are hard, you lose track of what you actually have created and
yeah.
the wins that you have had.
Mm,
And it's very easy to wallow in your own failures, right? And
yeah.
um, and being self-conscious and kind of like, I should have done differently, I should have chosen safer, I should have done this, but tracking back and seeing seeing this journey made me want to continue and hopefully grow more. With growth, I don't mean money. I mean growing in the sense of people and community and attitudes.
Exactly. Yeah. And I think we, as business owners, communicate outwardly a lot of positive stories, while it can be so, so hard and frustrating and tiring to do our work. And as you said, you did it 7 days a week. My gosh.
Yeah,
Do you have a team?
I do. I've not done 7 days a week by myself, but you have to be on. If the shop is open 7 days, you have to be on. So even on your days off, you have to be available. Your phone is constantly on. You keep checking what's going on in the shop. Do they need me? So you
Mm,
never have a complete withdrawal from the shop.
yeah.
And that's one thing that I'm claiming back now is that. But I do have
Nice.
the
Good for you.
most wonderful team.
If you want to start a business in the crafting industry, needle crafts or otherwise, or if you already run a shop, practically everybody that has their own business in a creative industry is welcome to join the Building Better Businesses Circle. As you can hear in this conversation with Maya, we talk about processes, marketing, organizing, setting goals, all of these things. And we talk about how we all want it, but how sometimes things really flip over and make everything different. In the Building Better Businesses Circle, we offer a program where you can learn to do this in an easy and simple way that really fits the way you work and fits your values. What we learn together is how you can refer back to a state where you know what you need to do and always can keep growing and always can connect to who you are as a business owner, doing things your way, but doing it very efficiently. So if you're interested, go to ja-volt.com and find the information there. Can you tell us a little bit about the team? Who are they and what do they do?
So George is my right and left arm and both legs, and sometimes my brain. He's been with me for 6, 7 years.
Wow.
And when I was facing this question about opening or expanding, I asked him to go through the process with me, because there was no way I was going to do this on my own again. I've done enough things on my own.
Yeah.
And that's exhausting. So I needed someone to be with me. He sent an application asking for a job before I was able to hire anyone. So it was me and my other partner Jess. We were in the shop every day, and an envelope came to the door, and I opened the envelope, and it had a handwritten application on a paper that had been punched holes and had a crochet edge.
Oh my gosh.
So when that came through and I read it, and I was like, and I told my partner, I was like, whatever we do, when we hire someone, it has to be George when we get to that point.
Yeah.
And it was still, I think it was still a year before we were like, okay, we're ready to get a shop assistant.
Yeah.
And I then called him, and he was like, yay. And then he came to the shop, and we had an interview, and then he realized that working here meant working for two shops at the same time. And to be an assistant would be splitting his time between It With Attitude and the other shop. And he took that full on. So yes, he's the hardcore team with me.
An asset.
Yeah, absolutely. And then we have wonderful weekend staff that kind of maintain the shop while we're not here.
Lovely. And how do you organize everything? Are you in the back with your computer doing things?
Um, it it depends. Sometimes I'm in the back with my computer. I prefer to be on the shop floor. I like interaction with people. That's what I do. So, and why I started this. So I get grumpy if I have to be on the back end for too long at the time. Yeah.
So you're in the back sometimes, and sometimes you prefer to be in the shop. Would you say that you are a very organized person? Do you have systems that you can rely on, or do you just take it as it comes?
I think that everyone running independent businesses try to have systems, and you create these beautiful systems, and you make your schedules, and this is how things are going to go, and this is my strategy. And then something happens that throws everything up in the air. That's my experience. I envy those that I can see are really good with their plans and have their strategy, that, those that order their Christmas stock in April, I'm in awe. Christmas comes as a surprise on me every year.
Every
Every
year. Oh, I can see that. Let me just give you a compliment then. I love your newsletter.
Thank
You really give some insight and some emotion and some story again to what it is that you're doing. You're not just showcasing your products, it's more about the story, and I love
It's
that.
interesting. It's very interesting what happened with the newsletters during COVID and when we were in isolation, which were terrifying, both for me as running the shop, but also for my customers. There was a shift in my newsletters where I became more personal. And at one point, I've been questioning because it's very tiring to be that personal. And it also becomes an expectation. So people who read my newsletters do want me to be personal. And that
Mm-hmm.
balance can be hard to achieve sometimes. But what
Yeah.
happened during COVID was that it became the community aspect of it became so big. And I wrote my newsletter and I had like 50 replies from people who read it telling me their stories. And and it has continued like that. So it's like I have a pen pal, but
Yeah.
that pen pal is 8,000 people. and
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
it's become a very organic entity of its own, which I find it feeds me. So there's a lot
Yeah.
of people tell me that they love the newsletters and they get so much out of
Mm.
it and it's personal and emotional, but it also feeds me in return. It gives me reassurance. It gives me
Yes.
inspiration. Yeah,
Feedback.
absolutely.
Yes.
Mm.
Validation. Yeah. Definitely. So important. I love hearing that. And am I right that you kind of do a combination of the email and your blog? Or are those separate
No,
stories?
they're a combination. Absolutely.
That's super
Yeah.
smart. People, listen, this is super smart. Don't work harder, work
Yeah,
smarter.
absolutely.
Um, And another thing about the newsletter is that when I talk to the business circle that I run, we talk about copywriting and content and all of this. And a lot of people say long form newsletters is not the way to go. That's some idea that we got in our heads, which is not true.
I agree. Communication, it went into social media run, right? And in social media, you have to use 40 characters and that's it. And I think that a lot of people now has a social media fatigue because you cannot
Absolutely.
tell the stories. You cannot express opinions, and the most important thing, we cannot discuss between us in 40-character sentences. That's not possible. Um, I if I can say the most important lesson that I've learned, which I want to let any and not only on shops but any small business owner know, is that you do not have to be an entertaining artist to communicate about your business. You don't have to
No,
start doing funny dances and trends on social media, but you have to make sure that your business is not only based on social media because then it can fall just by the algorithms. The most I
absolutely.
would just say the most direct way to communicate with your customers and to maintain a personal relationship, but but also customer loyalty is through newsletters. Newsletters are direct communication.
And you own them, they're yours. So as a business, you can decide what you want to do at what time, and you're not at the whim of some. I don't know,
Yeah.
some social media that's not yours.
Exactly. They don't disappear within 20 seconds and they don't, they're
Exactly.
there. It's your best, I would
Yes.
say, the best channel for direct communication. Mm.
Yeah, that's amazing. I love how you build your audience this way and your customers and how you connect with them. And is there anything else you want to say about marketing that you do that you either love to do or do not love to do but have to, or things that you decide you are going to move away from?
I think that when things are hard, you get desperate and you try out everything. And then you try it out as a means of desperation. So you throw money at, for instance, Facebook advertising, or you throw money at Instagram advertising, and you're hoping for a quick fix. And in
Yeah.
my experience, that's lost money. I think that you need to have a strategy on where you put your money in and where you put the effort in. And coming to marketing, I think like now with this shop expansion and everything, we in June my Facebook advertising account was hacked and it
Mm.
went down, and it's been down since. So I have no Facebook advertising happening now. Before uh, opening, I was overwhelmed with so much work, and I was like struggling with how are we going to reach out to people and tell them that this big thing is happening. So instead of putting all my money into a campaign of some sort, Google or Instagram or whatever, that kind of like would be shooting blindly and hoping that something would happen, I spent the same amount of money hiring someone to help me. And that's the best amount of money I've ever spent.
Yeah.
And in that way, I was able to reach out and to communicate with many more than I would have through putting that money into a social media campaign. Yeah, I think that my attitude towards this is don't do those impulsive quick fixes, because they turn out to be more expensive than yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
money pits. Yeah. Thank you so much. Oh my gosh, I've picked up so much from your conversation, and I really love your attitude. I think we have a lot in
Oh,
common.
I agree.
Yeah, let's just ask the good people that are listening. If you're listening, go to knitwithattitudes.com and sign up for this newsletter and see what we're talking about and how it can be done. It's a great example of a good newsletter. To end our conversation, what is your newest product in the shop that you want to showcase?
I mean, I have half a shop with new products. And I love every single bit of what's here.
I don't think about the owners. Don't think about the connections with the people.
I'm most excited about Jude and Stranded Dye Works. I've known Jude for years. I think that his personal journey is reflected in the way he develops his colors.
Well, I'll have a look at that. Thank you so much for being on A Smaller Life. I love talking to you, and I hope we stay connected and share other ideas of our very beautiful industry.
Absolutely.
Awesome. Thank you so much. I hope you have a wonderful day, and I don't know, pet some green yarn for me. Thanks so much.
I will.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Saskia. Bye.
Yahoo is a platform that aims to inspire people to take positive action to be part of a better world. We focus our efforts on the things we love doing so that it actually can be fun. In the community, makers and sellers come together, share and talk about doing their part in changing the way we look at fashion and making our own clothes. The community is open to anyone that wants to take the journey to creating and curating a more conscious closet. The BBBC program helps small businesses in the industry run a healthy and holistic business that gets noticed. I'm excited to mention that the early bird tickets for the next cohort are now available. If you want to know more, go to www.ja-wol.com, and click on Sellers. This podcast exists to inspire you to take action, to do things a bit differently, so you in turn can inspire the people around you. Share the joy of making, find solutions, and share the good news. We are amazing and important. Now, go do good in the world and have some fun while doing it.